I believe that I shall see the bounty of the Lord. Do you believe that you will see the bounty of the Lord? Through life and all that it holds, as followers of Christ, we are expected, we are invited to trust in God. And this sounds nice, might even sound easy, even romantic. Trust in God. But what happens when God brings us to our knees, so to say? What happens when God brings us down the mountain and we're expected to walk by faith and not by sight? What happens when God asks us to leave comfort behind? Or even farther, what do I do when comfort and security all of a sudden begins being stripped away from me? About 10 years ago, I remember getting a phone call from my dad, just like it was yesterday. I could tell right away he was truly shaken, stunned in his voice. 28 years, he had one job, one workplace, and then suddenly let go. Whether it's health, employment, the sickness, or the loss of a loved one, to simply waking up, and facing what lies ahead in the day, all that can unfold, depending on our circumstances, how hard, actually hard it can be for the Christian to put our trust in God. I just look at this first reading with Abram. God brings him outside and says, look up at the sky, and if you can, count the stars. Just so shall your descendants be. Now, the context is everything here. Remember, Abram is no spring chicken. He's at least 75 years old. And his wife, Sarai, is barren. And she's remained barren despite God's alleged promise, that Abram will have all these descendants. And yet God keeps telling him, Abram, go here, do this, do that, and you will be blessed. But the context here, by all appearances, it's just the opposite. Abram, he does go here, he does do that. And what follows is trial after trial after trial. First, God called Abram to leave home. This is no just small thing. To get up, to be uprooted with his family, and to go to this foreign place, a place surrounded by strangers. And what happens next, it does not seem to be blessing, but trial. A great famine breaks out. And so Abram and his family, they're forced to relocate once again and to go even further from home into Egypt. And then once again, it's like trial. Pharaoh begins to be this threat and actually works to dismantle his family. Plus, we go through the context in the scriptures, we see there's family issues with his nephew Lot. And so for Abram, this might seem like us in our life. Obedience to God seems to have brought him one trial after another. So this is where he is, still childless, as we come to today's reading. And God is expecting him to hold out hope. He's literally asking Abraham to walk by faith, not by sight. So God calls Abram out of his tent and he says, look toward heaven and count the stars. so shall your descendants be. In this context, what happens next is absolutely remarkable. What do we hear? Abraham put his faith in the Lord. Abraham believed God. He trusted. It's like unthinkable. It's like absurd. And, we could think like, well, of course he did. But just think all these trials Abraham had faced. And not to mention, I had for so long never knew this or noticed it. There's such a crazy detail from this reading, this account. As we get to the end of the verses, sometime after Abraham was to count the stars in the sky, we hear the sun was going down. Catch that. In other words, God asked Abraham to count the stars in broad daylight. I don't know about you, but it's hard to count the stars in broad daylight. Abraham had faith in what he could not see. Even though he didn't yet have a single son, he believed. That is trust. He couldn't see with his eyes but one star. Yet he knew that they were there. He decided to trust. All of us, to one degree or another, we have seen God and his glory. We've seen God work. And like Peter, James, and John, we've had these intimate, profound mountaintop experiences. That's how we're here. And yet, like Peter, James, and John, each of us have been and will be led down those mountains by God, required to trust in him even as we face the cross. And so for us to ask, like in what areas of my life today, right now, where I feel comfort or security being stripped away, am I most challenged to say, yes, God, I do trust in you. It's there and precisely there that we're challenged to say, God, I believe in you. I put my faith in you. Even though I can't see how this will work out, I believe that I shall see the bounty of the Lord. Even if not in this life, I will stand firm, holding out hope for the next.